After some padding, he hears Tom say on the phone that he'll find out what happened and pull out his quill. And after some more padding, it at least has him consider fleeing to the mushroom world before fusing because he doubts anyone would be able to track him down. And if this was like the real world, he'd be right. He's only wrong because Eggman's in this world. And this is why it's pointless to pretend that it's a story about him going to the real world. It's still gonna stop being relatable anyways by having a possibly competent inventor in it. So why bother having the world be boring? It says Robotnik knew the odds of an event like that. It's good that they had fan service for the whole fan base by calling him Robotnik. There's padding that just rephrases what was just written until it says his mobile lab rumbled as it pulled off the highway and onto the grassy outfield near Ground Zero. He'd been contacted a whole 12 hours after the incident. Why not almost right away? After padding that rephrases what was just said, it eventually reveals that 4 satellites in low Earth orbit burned out, which could potentially kill someone. Our hero! If this weren't based on a pre-established franchise, the audience would have turned on the guy who did this because he's so dangerous that he is that without even trying. And because they can't say that he's good because he's different. No other Sonic was responsible for that much trouble. The story lampshades that waiting so long to call in Eggman made people fools. Then why did the scriptwriter not fix that nonsense? Eggman working for the government was already done in the backstory of Sad AM. At least here it's believable that he got hired. Eggman leaves his armored vehicle, and the story wastes my time until he goes to the baseball field and asks who's in charge, with Agent Stone behind him. Someone says he is and gets told he's not, and told that because something the government knows is supernatural happened, he's been put in charge of dealing with it. He talks too much. Usually Eggman's arrogant, but this Eggman has right away come off as a snob kind of arrogant. It's a different, inherently unappealing kind where he's condescending to people who don't actually deserve it. So already it's gotten Eggman wrong. He's not entertaining when he's like this. The story gets boring. Why would I care about Stone praising Eggman indirectly? He talks too much too, and he's just as condescending. The story should have them getting a bunch of slapstick at some point. It is good that they make them unlikable so you're less likely to root for them. But if the writer knew Sonic caused so much trouble that we might hate him for it, then he should have changed that in the script. So the only reason Eggman knew to go after Sonic was that he ran around instead of ahead for no reason. Or he could have been called because Sonic got caught on camera from a home security system that records the entrance to a house. His constant theft would have had a realistic consequence. And it'd be believable because he would have been caught doing something he was already doing before. Stealing food and water bottles is something Sonic would do if it was the only way he could get stuff he needed to live. So that could have been what he tried to steal, and then it'd be fine. After some unnecessary padding that at one point says he did nothing but evil things for the government before this, he says 10 miles in every direction should be good enough. But if Sonic's so fast, it really shouldn't be. Why would he stop at 10 miles? If he just left town after this like a not insane person, the story wouldn't have happened. He uses keyboards to get his drones to fly, and there's some redundant padding before he tells the drones to leave no stone unturned. After redundant narration for several sentences, Eggman notices something in a recorded image from one of the drones with infrared scanners. And after padding because he asks Stone if he saw what he did for no reason, it wastes my time until he zooms in on the footprint. With a swipe of his hands, he sees the 3D image of a shoe split apart to reveal a paw that's more complex than a forest creature's. I assume the fact that they use infrared scanners is supposed to explain this, but it still feels like magic tech that destroys any immersion there used to be. It could have just had Sonic lose a shoe. He could have had a pebble in his shoe but had to run away before he could put it back on. After redundant padding, I wonder why Eggman thinks he's determined the spine curvature and height and weight of Sonic based on a single footprint. There's padding after this. A lot of it. He has the drones follow Sonic's footprints so that they head for his home. Sonic can handle drones, and he can find another cave. The story wastes a bunch of my time being redundant. It turns out Tom made himself useful after all by saving the food from spoiling in people's fridges. I don't understand why Maddie's telling him to wait a few days before trying to drive out of town. After some padding, he hears his garbage can get knocked over again, and there's some redundant padding for a while, as I wonder why Sonic even knocked over the can at all. Until finally he hears Sonic trying to convince himself to go to another planet in his garage. If going to that planet was always his plan, he could have done that somewhere else. Wouldn't the footprints follow him here? Tom brought a tranquilizer gun meant for bears here, and eventually freaks out so much from seeing him his trigger finger slips, and he shoots the dart into his tiny neck. He throws the ring, and it takes a lot of words to describe that the ring became a portal to the top of the tower in San Francisco, because he saw the poster. Somehow, Sonic passes out already when tranquilizers take a while to work. The fact that it was meant for bears just makes me wonder why I didn't overdose him. And what's said after that is stuff I could have assumed would happen. Eventually, he carries Sonic to his couch and gives him his quill back. And after a while, he wakes up. Eventually, after the expected and redundant dialogue happens, Sonic gets asked if he's here to abduct him because he's an alien. Sonic's confused and says he abducted him, and he admits he's right, as I wonder why he said he planned to abduct him, based on what he said in the garage. Tom admits he's right, and Sonic gives him exposition we already know, and explains that because the drones started tearing through his stuff, he's the only person he could think of to turn to. And that's why he came to his garage. But he was considering going to the mushroom world before he found him. So he changed his mind. After some padding with predictable dialogue, he asks for his help, and says his legs don't work and his rings are gone. After some padding, it explains that the reason Eggman won't just search Tom's house is that he doesn't want to get fired for it because it's illegal, even though he's looking for a dangerous alien. So he wanted to outthink him. Tom talks to him, and after a bit of padding, Eggman lies that he's from the power company investigating the blackout, so he wants to take readings from inside his house. After some wasted time, Tom says that the power company is supposed to take readings from outside the house. And he leans closer to him and reveals that the friend he mentioned to him works for a different company than he said before, so he just caught him in a lie. If even the average person knows that you don't take readings from in the house, why did the so-called genius think that would be fallen for? There's some padding after this. Tom says everyone calls him Tom but his dentist because it'd be weird to correct him after so long. So that was an attempt at humor. But why did he say this in this situation? After some pointless padding, it's revealed that Eggman's drone had sent data to his glasses that Sonic was in the house. And after some pointless words, he takes an overly long time telling him that he knows Sonic's in the house. Tom mocks his condescending talking and says he needs a mint in a lesson on manners, so that's great. But after this is a bunch of padding. There's a lot of boring words after this, with Eggman being a chatterbox and the drone looking for Sonic. Eventually the drone finds Sonic. Eventually he says now, and all the drones smash through the windows and head for the kitchen. And Eggman only finds a raccoon in the house somehow. After some padding, he picks up a quill. After some padding, Eggman says 5 seconds before he lets his drones tear this place apart. He intimidated Tom with his authority, so I guess that's why he doesn't punch him. And he also doesn't want to get into a real fight, I guess. After some padding, Sonic eventually tells Eggman he's the one he wants. After redundant narration, Tom punches Eggman between the eyes, which is impressive. And Eggman somehow is able to insult him before passing out. He wouldn't call him a caveman for that. He was way better in the previous books where he actually seemed like Eggman. Sonic lampshades with a laugh that he knocked him out with one punch. From around the corner, a drone starts blasting a wall with machine gun fire. And all because Sonic came here being selfish. It's explained as self-defense protocol. Sonic states the obvious and gets yanked from the floor, and after padding, he's dragged behind a couch. It says Sonic has a hyper-fast metabolism, which is surprising, because that hasn't been a thing since the 90s books. It says the metabolism's doing quick work on what was in that dirt, but he could still only use speed for short bursts. It says juice as a way of saying his speed, to throw a bone to SATM fans, so that's sweet. Eventually, Sonic grabs the drone and gets launched across the room. Tom yanks him out of the air, and they run out to the lawn. After padding where Sonic tries to save face, threatening the drone and looks pathetic, it says he tried not to puke, even though if he could get motion sick that easily, how can he handle spin dashes and going through loops? So he should be immune to it. He climbs into the cab of his truck, and the narration has him reject the idea of calling someone by his preferred name because he's selfish. Tom starts questioning him the predictable way as he drives away, and a bunch of siren-wailing SUVs swarm his front lawn behind him already, somehow. Sonic says he's a hedgehog and he feels like that's obvious, even though earlier he showed he had enough knowledge about the world to know that Amazon's gonna start using drones. Why does he not know that Earth hedgehogs don't look enough like him? Even if he never learned there was an animal called hedgehog on Earth, he still won't think that's obvious because he won't think Tom knows the term. If they really wanted to make it feel like he went to the real world, then people would recognize him as Sonic and wonder why he has two separate eyes. He says his name and states the obvious he already told him. It's satisfying that Tom tells him that he's in big trouble too because he punched a government weirdo. He says, "Oh, you're in big trouble." It's cathartic to see him be mad at Sonic after everything Sonic's done and been responsible for. Longclaw wouldn't have been killed if she had left him alone. Sonic plays misery poker with him instead of caring about him because he's been suppressing his empathy for years. If he hadn't cried over Longclaw, I would have thought he didn't have any empathy. He won't even take responsibility by saying what he did to cause the blackout. He just says something happened. He'll take responsibility for the blackout. So then why doesn't he say how he caused it at this point? This is why I'm holding it against Sonic that he got Tom in trouble, even though it's Eggman who did the bad thing. Why does Tom think Sonic's on a countdown to explode? Why does Sonic say he's just a teenager? That's irrelevant right now. And he never acted mature enough to be a teenager. At least I'm saying dude is in character. He says everything in his life sucks right now, and Tom says he's been there sympathetically. So that's nice. Tom insists that he could unscrew his life if he does the same for him. How? He says he's got to get his rings back. After Tom wastes my time stating the obvious, Sonic says all advanced cultures use the warp rings. He eventually says that the rings were put on top of the skyscraper in San Francisco because he looked at the poster of it. After padding, Tom says the reason he knows where that building is that he's going to move to San Francisco. Sonic doesn't react to this actually. Instead, Tom wastes my time until he tells Sonic goodbye and hopes this is all a dream after he's passed out from anesthetic. You don't dream after that. It's also pretty gutsy that they use the word colonoscopy in a Sonic story. He opens the door of the trunk, and after a while, Sonic says he doesn't know which direction to run. Tom tells him no, and he actually points out that he's got trouble with the property value on his shot-up house and doesn't want to become a fugitive by taking him there. I guess the idea is he'd look guilty of trying to save the alien if he disappeared after hitting Eggman. When before, he could have kept maintaining that he was innocent and just defended himself after he illegally broke into his house. Sonic says that if he gets into his rings, he won't be a fugitive. He has no reason to believe this. So it just comes off as him lying to him to try to get him to help him. He eventually says that if he disappears, Eggman won't have a thing on him. And it has him call Eggman Robotnik as fan service to SATM fans, so that's sweet. But I never liked that nickname. He also manipulates him by flattering him that he was made for this. This is just reminding me of how Sonic treated Scratch and Grounder. The manipulation works even though Tom lampshades that he's crazy or desperate for trying to help him. After patting, he says he wants to drive through forested back roads until they're out of town, because he doesn't want to risk the drones hurting anyone, because he's got empathy. Well, Sonic didn't even consider that. Him being an anti-hero isn't supposed to inconvenience and terrify innocent people, because how would that be marketable? Sonic is the villain in this movie so far. I've seen someone say that before. If he wasn't Sonic, who would be rooting for him? Sonic says right on, and after patting, Tom plans to lay low somewhere and doesn't explain why. He shouldn't think they would stop looking for his vehicle no matter how long he waited. It's satisfying that he tells him that if they're gonna call him by his name, Sonic's gotta call him Tom for once. After redundant patting, he says he won't be getting any trouble from him. I don't see the point of the same reference being made more than once. At this point, it's cathartic that Tom says, like the kind of trouble that comes from you spying on us for years. There's really nothing wrong with what he did. It didn't inconvenience them, so he shouldn't care. There weren't any sinister motivations to it. And Sonic again doesn't take responsibility, and instead puts what he did in a sugar-coated way, even though Tom already agreed to help him so he doesn't have to. He says they're all hanging out and he just didn't notice it. Again, it only flies because it's Sonic. After patting, where at least Sonic finally feels bad about scaring Crazy Carl into trying to catch him with bear traps. It says Sonic didn't like being trapped in that truck for so long at a time. If the scriptwriter knew that was in character, because he liked exploring new places, why do you have him never leave Green Hills? After some patting when Tom stops for gas to call Maddie from a payphone, Sonic sees the allure of civilization, and after some redundant over-explaining of this, he runs to the roadhouse through some motorcycles. It couldn't literally mean he went through them, right? And gets to a table in a loud biker bar. He stole some articles of clothing and sunglasses from the motorcycles, so he put on a cowboy hat and big flannel shirt and shades. But the writer's too lazy to tell me the colors of the shirt so I could picture it right. I don't even know what Tom's wearing as he runs into the bar as he's got his feet up on the table. Everyone would be staring at him here. I assume the reason they don't freak out is that they think he's in a cosplay costume. Tom says they're going, and Sonic says no because of the likable reason that there's so much he's never done in his life. He wastes time redundantly before saying he wants to order buffalo wings and guac. And he says guac's a funny word. It's trying to make him relatable here. After some patting where it's gone right that Sonic's got no attention span and the jitters and is a loudmouth, eventually Tom lampshades him not stealing some pants and gets told the confusing excuse that fur is comfortable on its own. His real reason would be that he didn't need pants because everyone would assume he was wearing a costume. And he had enough on to look like a biker anyways. After some pointless patting, it says Sonic rode a mechanical bull for the first time in the series until he got bored and made it a perpetual backflip pad. What does that mean? If he damaged it, he would have been kicked out. He also played basketball, which was only new because he had Tom throw him into the basket, which actually Tom found a little fun. Tom would have been less sympathetic if he was non-stop in no fun allowed mode like Sally, which is what I expected. It wastes time until it explains that Sonic's line dancing across the whole place has him accidentally kick someone. So the guy calls him out on it, and while it wasn't called for, they called him a hipster doofus. He deserves it after all the stuff he stole. Sonic stupidly insults him and blames him for a mistake that he could have easily not made. How am I supposed to sympathize? Tom tries to de-escalate things, but he doesn't do it very effectively at first because he says it's cool. It's good that he says they were about to leave, but he didn't need to tell him they're on their way to San Francisco. After patting, Sonic doesn't respect Tom's wishes and sociopathically grabs the biker's waistband and taunts him and tears a wedgie up out of the leather pants and over the back of his head for insulting him. Archie Sonic gave Eggman a wedgie, But all he did was accurately call him a doofus and call him something that's hardly even an insult. Because people have the right to their opinions. By the time Sonic was able to stop laughing, he got surrounded by bikers, which were surprisingly all mad at him. Somehow, there wasn't a single person in the bar who also laughed at this ridiculousness. After redundant narration, it eventually says that everything's getting thrown in the bar because Sonic caused a cliche bar fight. Of course, nothing hit Sonic. Because somehow, the audience didn't think we wanted him hurt for that. Or for anything else he did. It over-describes the chaos of this. There's redundant narration, and then it starts describing some more of his being a karmic trickster who punishes people for resorting to violence just because it's annoying instead of ignoring him. So they deserved this, but he should have just left the bar. Someone gets covered with spaghetti with Sonic stealing and eating all the chili dogs, which people would have eaten otherwise. Someone finds his feet in rolling mop buckets. And the two muscular guys heading for Tom for no reason get wrapped in toilet paper. It's compared to the Three Stooges to try to artificially make people like it more. Do bars have constant surveillance like every other business? I think they do, to catch crime. So won't Sonic get into legal trouble for this later? I'd like to think he had to do some community service for it. That's what Tom should have told him to do about all the theft he did. It's just weird that it gets swept under the rug. After some padding, Sonic eventually pushes aside some bikers so that Tom could escape the bar with him. Tom's surprisingly happy and laughing a little, when the entire time I thought he'd be pissed at Sonic. And it takes a little while to get to them getting into the trunk. It's a good thing Tom knows how to drive a trunk, despite driving a car normally. Eventually, Sonic says the bikers wouldn't be able to catch up with him because he piled a mountain of furniture on his way out. So they know he's got magical powers at this point. And that's a lot of witnesses. That'd be all over social media and spread even faster if there was footage of it. Tom says smartly that they're going straight to San Francisco after this and drives away. After padding, Sonic points out that he loved it there, and it turns out he sort of did. This is actually him being like Game Sonic here, where he meets somebody new and he improves his life. He shows him a new perspective, like how he did with Blaze. The radio reveals that there's a manhunt out for Tom, who's apparently stolen government property. I thought he drove away in his own vehicle. It makes more sense this way, because it'd make for a faster getaway if he drove away in a truck that still had the keys in the ignition. I really wish the radio didn't say this. The radio doesn't say Tom's name, and all it does is describe him as a 30-something. So it could have been a lot worse. It could have ruined his reputation and job prospects. It could have done a lot worse if it had mentioned his name. Maybe he would have lost his job. There's no way it'd do such a worthless job describing him. But it's nice to him that the half-ass effort does nothing to inconvenience him. If it's not going to be an inconvenience, then why even have the radio say that? Then it says Sonic stared out the window at the morning sunlight, and that they'd stopped behind a billboard to grab a few hours of sleep. Now the truck's heading for San Francisco, too slow for Sonic. After a while, Sonic tells him to floor it, without explaining himself in a way that'd be persuasive. And for some reason, he has to get told that he wants to lay low. There's padding, and Sonic suddenly asks out of bitterness why he would care if his place was torched if he's leaving this town anyways. Even though he was told earlier that it'd have lower property value. I don't know why someone with no control over his emotions in most of the scenes he was in was able to suppress his emotions when he was told Tom was leaving the town earlier. Now he's making a big deal out of it by calling this place the best place in the world, which is stupid. If he has awareness of pop culture, he should know better. It always feels arbitrary when a character has an argument with another character about something that in an earlier scene he wasn't making a big deal of to him. It would be really horrible writing if that happened earlier in the franchise as well. Surprisingly, instead of actually explaining why he was really bored with this place from this first scene to make a good argument, all Tom says is that the town is small and says some vague stuff, and says he can't live his life enough there. Sonic wastes time arguing with him and wastes more time after saying there's hundreds of people in the town, so it's big to him. He eventually says the town's got great people when he's really got no reason to think that. I guess it's more the fact that he'll say anything to manipulate someone, because I thought he was only spying extensively on Donut Lord. He has a good point that what could possibly be more important than protecting the people you care about. Tom says he cleans out people's gutters and jump-starts their cars in the winter, being useful, but he says they could call anybody to do that. And Sonic flatters him that they call him instead. They hear shattering glass because a grappling hook broke through their back window and buried itself in the dashboard. And Sonic turns around to see a spinning egg-shaped drone on the other end. Surprisingly, Eggman says Yahtzee out of a drone speaker when he wasn't comical before in this book. Sonic wastes time stating the obvious and reassures Tom he can smash the machine no problem, but doesn't tell him how he can. So I guess that justifies Tom insisting on Sonic being at the wheel while he handles this with a tire iron. That's surprising. Tom climbs out the back window, breaking out the rest of the jagged glass. There's redundant narration, and he clutches the roof as the drone heads closer. He swings the iron at it, making it spin to the left. It pulls the car with it, and Sonic jerks the steering wheel back and forth and doesn't use the brakes, which were somehow misspelled, and the truck swerves left and right. How convenient that when Tom complained about Sonic's driving skills, the drone was too polite to hurt him. Why does Sonic laugh at a time like this? He states the obvious, and Tom wrecks the drone. But after some padding, a fleet of little robots swarm the truck. Eventually, Tom takes the seat back, and Sonic jumps out of the truck and hits the highway running, and rolls into a ball, which after some padding, strikes Eggman's mobile lab so that it collapses, making the vehicle spin off-road. Why does Eggman call his robots Botniks instead of outright Badniks to make the reference complete? Botnik is easier to take seriously, but it's still goofy. It should just call them robots at that point. The top of the vehicle splits open to launch a spider-like dune buggy drone onto the road that spins out its wheels with a screech and heads for Sonic. Sonic says tech this ugly is more like Badniks, so the term Botnik was just a forced excuse for him to call them Badniks. But what is more believable than Eggman willingly calling robots he made bad when people don't know they're evil? Sonic runs back to the truck, which shudders when he hits the tailgate, and he climbs into the back. After padding, they see something black in the mirror get increasingly big. Tom quips about it not taking it seriously, and out of complete nowhere, Sonic says it's over and Tom has to leave him. He says that if Eggman tracks just him, maybe even if he captures him, Tom and the town would be okay. It's out of nowhere for someone who showed a consistent lack of empathy the whole film, so this comes off as a shortcut to brainwash the audience into liking him. Well, I'm not going to forget all the thefts he did, or I'm giving someone a wedgie for insulting him. But it makes sense that he'd want to protect Tom because he really missed having someone to talk to, as the narration said earlier. So he doesn't even have to have empathy to want to protect him. Somehow, Tom tells him that's crazy, but still feels touched and guilty. He selfishly says Sonic doesn't know the town anything. It's pretty surprising for the parent stand-in, who before was lecturing him because he's irresponsible. He owes the town money to pay for the stuff he stole. After padding, he tells Tom that if he leaves, who's gonna judge a blueberry festival or sit in the dunk tank? This Sonic has no reason to care about that. He's just trying to manipulate him. Tom lampshades that now's not the time to talk about this. It makes sense that someone would be so frustrated that they'd complain about something else that frustrated them. The dune buggy bot is right behind the truck at this point. Tom floors it for nothing, and the robot sprouts tiny arms that claw at the pavement just inches from their wheels. It didn't have to say the arms were made of metal. So after Sonic wastes precious time whining, somehow thinking that everyone in the town's gonna be left alone like him, eventually jumps off the truck and jumps onto the dune buggy. He claps, causing a shockwave of blue energy to radiate out of them to make it collapse. So that's new. All the little lights in Eggman's van go dead, but Sonic gets flung back and lands in the truck bed. Why is it miraculous that Tom still had control of the vehicle? He stops it and hopes Sonic's not hurt. I just can't appreciate him calling him his friend after everything he went through because of him. Because that and how selfish Sonic was just a minute ago makes it seem forced. The scriptwriter wants him to get that attached to Sonic, therefore he does, even though he's nothing but trouble, and acts like a brat he's trying to babysit instead. He only just did something for him and with a selfish motivation. Of course Sonic's okay, and it's lame that he references something he said earlier in the plot, and Tom plays along. It seems like another film cliche as a shortcut for making people sentimental. The story wastes my time after this, with Tom stating the obvious, and Sonic lying that he didn't mean it when he said Tom was leaving everyone alone so he could get out of trouble with him, even though he obviously isn't in trouble anymore. He states the obvious excuse for it. Tom thankfully interrupts him, telling him to talk about it later. And the story wastes time with a blatant padding villain scene where it invalidates the mobile lab getting wrecked because Eggman gets a new one the next time we see him within hours. The narration is boring and repetitive and unlikable by talking like Eggman, and the dialogue's the same way. Eggman goes from coldly being insulting to dancing lamely to the stereo out of nowhere. It's like he's got a split personality, because him usually being serious makes it confusing when he acts different. I think the general consensus is Sonic dances in a cool way, and Eggman doesn't. It takes a whole lot of boring words before explaining that the Quill got the distinct energy signature of Sonic in his computer. The story wastes my time after that until the scene ends. It just doesn't seem like Eggman to like chai tea latte of all things. I expect that more out of Starline. And what's the big deal about Agent Stone? He's just a polite assistant with nothing more to him. He's a change of pace from the other sidekicks from that alone, but I expected more than just that from the worship he gets. So he doesn't betray Eggman. Grimer already was like him, but also made an impression as a villain right away against Sonic by being menacing to him with a smirk, and then thinking he outsmarted him. And this guy also has a boring design. And I wouldn't even know what he looked like if I hadn't seen any screenshots of him, because the book was too lazy to describe him. Why would I give him the same hair color as Tom?